Welcome to the show, Adi. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
We want to start with a quick introduction.
Yeah, so my name is Adi Goldman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Biotic. Biotic is an Israeli-based startup aiming to develop and manufacture a biological polymer that will be able and will be scalable and allow replacement of fossil-based plastics with fully biodegradable alternatives.
Love it. What is your story?
Yeah, we are three co-founders. Two of us have been working together over 12 years now. We were working in a company that developed measurement devices for bulk solid application. I was in charge of the marketing and sales and business development, and my colleague was the R&D manager and the product manager. We were acquired by a big American corporate that has decided 2 years ago to close our office in Israel, and we needed to look for a new venture. So for us, it was very clear that we will do that together. And the other thing that was very important to us is to find something that will generate a better legacy for our kids. So create something better for the world. And plastic was the go-to industry. We started doing research around alternatives that are available for plastic. We started from everything, glass, metal, bamboo, paper, whatever you can think of, and then drill down into the polymers arena and figured out eventually what we want to focus on. And then about a year and a half ago, we added Nofar, our third co-founder. She's the biologist, into the team. And together we revived this idea that we had into something real.
Love it. And why plastic? I know there's environmental concerns, but as a business, what was your motivation to focus on plastic for now?
I like to think of the two of us visionaries, and we wanted to do something with an impact. And following that, I think that climate change, pollution, and these aspects are things that will affect the world in the long term if we are not starting to deal with them now and quickly. So there were other options to go to, but we decided to go to plastics because we know the manufacturing arena. We know the plastic producers upstream and downstream. We know the customers, food and beverage, consumer goods, chemicals, everybody that uses or produce plastic. And it's something that we identified that is lacking of optimal solution that will allow the transition.
I agree with you. I think there's nothing more important than making sure we reduce our carbon footprint or making sure we don't damage the environment as much as we are doing right now. So there's nothing more important than that. So what business model you were thinking about?
So I think that what we are aiming towards now is being a commodity manufacturer. So in opposite to many companies that come to these markets with amazing solutions that are focused around a niche market or a specific industry needs, we are here to develop an overall process. So altogether, we target to be able to produce polymers that will suit the entire industry of plastics. So we're looking at being a commodity manufacturers, either through our own manufacturing facilities, that probably in a couple of years' time, I hope so, and or through sub-licensing the technologies to partners around the world to enable the reach into this market. I think that there is an aspect that I haven't mentioned in the beginning, which could be important to understanding how we see things evolve. We are using marine biomass as feedstock to our precise fermentation process. One of the reasons for that is not competing with arable land. That's one aspect. And the other one is being global. That these types of macroalgae, they grow everywhere in the world very quickly. They can be harvested every, two weeks or so. So that will allow also reduction in shipment and transportation, and the entire supply chain can be much easily approached. So that's why we are not relying on a specific biomass that exists only in Israel or in Europe. It's global, so it makes sense to sub-license and or establish facilities in each part of the world.
No, love it, love it. We will double click on that in a bit when we talk about the tech and science behind your business. So I'm curious, like, what was the barrier to entry to start this business?
The first thing for us was to understand that there is a business behind it, and by business, from our point of view, is not just being able to produce a polymer that can replace plastic, but also to bring it to a price that will be cost effective for customers to purchase. Not
Mm-hmm.
3 times the price of today's fossil-based plastics, or 4 or 5 times the price, but actually something that is as similar as possible. So that was one thing that we needed to check when we did our business plan and the financials behind it. Once we understood that there is a path to achieve that, so yes, you're right. It's a lot of biological aspects that needs to be validated. We started small by financing it by ourselves, doing lab scale proof of concept and scaling up proof of concept at subcontractor facility to make it easier and more cost effective for us at the time. And for customers, also we took an approach very early on, almost the minute that we established the company, to reach out to potential customers and potential partners. And so by customers, it's quite straightforward. So companies like in the food and beverage, consumer goods, medical, and such. Partners could be anything from the actual producers of today's plastics, compounders or master batch producers, and also academic and research institution, so that we can build an infrastructure that will allow us to grow, that we will bring a solution that comes from the market.
I want to double click on, you mentioned your lab. There are other lab spaces doing something complementary in nature. So is it more like a shared lab space, like incubator, some cluster?
Yeah, it's a cluster. Yeah, it's not an incubator per se. It's a cluster of labs that was designed to support startups at early stages, allowing them to have a lab facility that is set as a lab.
And if someone want to start like bio manufacturing business, what challenges or what advice you want to share with them?
What I can advise or suggest to people that are looking into this arena is to look at everything as much as you can. So it's not only a lab, there is material supply chain that you need to be aware of, and not only in small scale. The important thing is to look at the scaling up, because this is where the problems could pop up when you try to convert something from lab into real life. This is where the issues can appear. So that's one thing. And for us, and I think that it's also should be something that every startup or every new company look at, is the environment. So whatever you do, please try and put sustainability in front of your eyes and think of the energy efficiencies, the hazardous or chemical materials that you are using, and some of them are staying in the product and go and then disappear into the world in a bad way in 5 years, and some of them are waste that needs to be treated. So we need to really pay attention to that and try to create as much a circular approach as possible, so that the next generations will get an industry that is already healthier than the one we have today.
Yeah, no, I love it how passionate you are about environmental impact. So that's pretty impressive. So I think it's a great segue to talk about your company. Like, how do you define Biotech? What is it?
So it's a company that targets a very visionary goal to replace fossil-based plastics. So we are talking about 400 million tons of plastics. Of course, we don't target to do it by ourselves, but we want to be part of an ecosystem that strive towards this goal. We are manufacturers of commodity, of a biopolymer commodity that has a wide range of applicability. Basically, what we produce can answer anything from very ruggedized or very brittle plastic to very flexible applications. We are using marine biomass because we understand the urgency or the impact that the agriculture and the arable land is facing today. We need to find alternate resources, and it's not only about plastics, and that's another reason why we chose to go to marine biomass. There is high value in macroalgae, not only absorbing carbon, and we can actually use this carbon and not add anything to the environment, but it also contains valuable byproducts such as proteins, lipids, colorants, other smaller molecules. And we are looking at a circular process. So we are taking algae, we feed it into a precise fermentation process using the carbon source mainly. The rest will be shipped or delivered or processed in other industries. From the fermentation, we use green chemistry, I would say, it's the right word. No hazardous materials, nothing that's remain on the polymer itself at the end of the line, no endotoxins, fit directly food and beverage and medical, and obviously all the other industries. We are always focusing around reducing energy, and at the end of the line, we want to provide this type of polymer at the same price that will allow replacement or transition as a drop-in solution from fossil-based plastics to biological alternatives, aiming to full biodegradation at any environment. So no compost or no special treatment.
It's very impressive. So is it safe to say Biotech is a biomanufacturing company that produces plastic leveraging marine microalgae? Yeah.
I would say that we want to be a biorefinery at the end of the line, you can say. Feed one thing into the plant, and that is marine biomass, and extract valuable plastic alternatives, but also byproducts that can serve other industries, and altogether capture as much CO2 as possible. And yes, bringing values to this market.
Love it. So when you say biorefinery, you mean you envision it with big fermenters, and you have a raw material, you have microalgae doing their job to produce plastic or to produce other commercially important products in a more sustainable way.
It's a microorganism cell that digest the carbon source and produce a polymer as an energy source.
Okay.
And at the end of the line, at the end of the process, we extract the polymer out of the microorganism, and we have directly polymer flakes. So we don't need to go into polymerization. It's a direct polymer.
Okay.
So that's another aspect that we bring on. But altogether, yes, it's enhancing biotechnology or metabolically engineering of microorganisms to generate goods for the world. And we are targeted on the plastics, but we have valuable outputs that can help alternative food industry. We have biostimulants for the agricultures, animal feed, cosmetics, flavors. So we believe that an ecosystem needs to evolve around these aspects. And that's why I mentioned biorefinery, because it's not just a single input-output as we see it.
Right. You already touched upon the science and tech behind it. Do you want to elaborate what type of things you have to do in the lab to really bring this product at the commercial stage or a manufacturing stage at the commercial scale?
I think that when we look at it, the most important part for us before going into a more commercial stage is optimization. And optimization can be reached through multiple phases as we see it. So first of all, there is the biomass, the treatment of the macroalgae. We can make it more efficient so that more material that is relevant to our process will be fed into the fermentation, and more valuable byproducts will come out of it untouched, because there is always a need to find a balance between what you want to extract from something and how you harm the other parts. So we are working on finding this balance. There is also the optimization of the fermentation process itself that can be done. The other thing is at the end of the line, so the extraction phase, there's always ways to optimize the extraction.
Right.
When you think about it, you can extract 10% of whatever you produced, and you can extract 70%. The way to do it, always there is a cost behind it, there is time behind it. We also need to find balance over there to make it more efficient and more direct. Then there is the core business of the fermentation that can be optimized through the process itself, through the metabolic engineering, allowing better the microorganism to work better and process better. So when looking at industrialization or commercialization, we are going to take step by step. We have a plan. Each time we're dealing with one or two, depending on the time frame. We have milestones around it that will allow us to improve efficiencies, improve the yields, and improve the costs, so that when we reach to the final stage of commercialization, we are at the targeted price that we have,
Right.
which is the fossil-based plastics.
Pretty cool. And do you have anyone in the lab designing these engineered microbes to extract more energy out of your raw material?
So we have two scientists. One is the CTO, Nofar. So she's a metabolic engineer expert and the fermentation. So along with her, there is another scientist, a biochemist, that supports the activity from, there are a lot of processes. There's a lot of work to do around it. I summarized it in very short, but the entire process is a complete masterpiece.
And do you own any fermenters too, or that process is not touched yet?
Until now we did everything at a subcontract. Not everything. The fermentation we did at a subcontractor.
Okay.
The lab we are doing at our lab, and we have a fermenter that we need to evaluate how it works. It's quite an old one. As a startup, you get your hands on something and you try to repair it. But if not, we have two very good subcontractors that enthusiastic about helping us, and we will do that at their facilities if we will not be able to bring to life our fermenter.
Right. So what is the IP behind it?
So currently, since we were self-funded, and still we barely have a big financing, we are considered everything as trade secret. However, we are in the process of building up a roadmap with an IP office here in Israel. We have reviewed the process with them. We've identified places where we will file patents, and when and what depends on the milestones of the companies, not only the need for IP. I think that a lot of the need for IP relies on fundraising and not on the actual need to file patent, right? So
that's true.
So we need to see the milestones that we want to achieve and adjunct them with the fundraising and with the need and the value of submitting or filing the patent, and that's the path that we'll take. We have about 7 areas. I mentioned 3 main activities, but we have about 7 areas where we have activities that can be patented as we progress.
No, totally. I think all these processes that you're optimizing, and especially if you plan to license it out to other biomanufacturers, it does make sense to protect. But I understand it takes time to understand what claims you want to protect, right? So because what you're creating is, you use the term masterpiece. So I think masterpiece here is like unique, novel combination of processes, right? So because you're optimizing it. So to protect that, it makes sense, but I agree, it takes time to understand what is really that claim to patent.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, it's a good point that you mentioned. You don't need to invent the wheel every time you do something new. So a startup is not about creating something from scratch all over again. It's sometimes you just need to take things and mold them together so that you can create something that is different, that is out of scope, and that is innovative. The industry exists for a very long time, and some things are quite good, and some expertise are very good at the different industries. So
Right.
it's enough to mix and match technologies and ideas and bring together with your own. So with the impact that you bring, it's an easier path towards success, I think.
Right, right. Because you have done quite a bit market research. I would love to know, how do you see the difference between the current traditional plastic manufacturing industry and biologically powered plastic manufacturing? So what are the two, how would you differentiate the processes and also the environment impact?
It's an old-fashioned industry that is basically sitting on the oil and gas stream, and it's a byproduct, and that's why it's relatively cheap to produce today, and it's well known. The capabilities that the companies are using are designed to operate with the existing polymers, so polyethylene, polypropylene, all the synthetic applications, and so that's from one hand, and which is the industry itself is very polluting in all aspects, and the products themselves at the end of the line, I think that there is a lack of knowledge in the population on how these plastics affect our everyday in so many ways. I mean, it's in what we wear, it's in our wearables, it's in our food. Microplastics are in our blood, in the breast milk. So it's really something that is really harmful, and that's only from a few decades of using plastics. From the other hand, when the ecosystem of biological polymers comes into this market, the alternatives of plastics, because it's not only biological polymers today, we need to also consider that the consumer really likes plastics. I mean, we really like it. It's nice. It's it doesn't weigh a lot. It feels good. It's smooth. It looks good. We can do a lot of things with it. I mean, everything almost can be done with it. We use it in every industry, from car manufacturers to electronics to, like I said, textile and agriculture. I mean, on the fields. So the discussion around just food packaging is just a drop in the ocean. I mean, it's just the tip of the iceberg, and that's why our ecosystem needs to consider. Today, it's a much more expensive process, producing polymers, which prevent companies to actually do the transition. Because if you look at, just as a price tags, if you want to consider fossil-based plastic cost at about $1 a kilo, and each alternative is 3, 4, 5 times that price, it's very difficult to implement it into the industry. So that's one aspect. And the other one is that we need to make sure that these polymers fit the machines that already exist everywhere. Nobody will change the production line. It doesn't make sense. It's an investment that, in order to do that, we need to do a large-scale proof of concept, which I don't really see happening in the short term. So if we want to create impact in the short term, we need to make sure that these products will fit as a drop-in alternatives to existing production lines. And that will create motivation to the producer, users, the manufacturers, implement it and increase the transition. And these three considerations that I mentioned, it's highly important, and it's one of the hassles I think that today's industry have. So we need to be aware of everything. Otherwise, this industry that's already existing and is already providing us with fuel and gases and everything else, they will keep this direction of the plastics.
Right.
And And one last thing that I would say about these oil and gas companies is that they feel the, the pressure, and mainly because of all the electrical cars and electrical vehicles, whatever that comes in. They will need to divert their capabilities, and we need to figure out how we allow them to be a player also in this innovative industry.
Very insightful. How do you produce this raw material, or you are sourcing the raw material from some other provider?
Yeah, the goal is to source it. I think, aquaculture farmers are available around the world. There are algae, so macroalgae grow naturally everywhere. So this is one aspect, and in some places they are considered invasive species. So countries or companies are looking to get rid of them. You have this situation now in France where you have tons of macroalgae lying on the beach and generating pollution because they are starting to rot. So this path is one. The other one that there are farmers that do this commercially already, mainly for food and beverage and cosmetics. So we can use their waste if needed, but we can also purchase it and source it. Currently, we are sourcing it here in Israel. There is also 2 growers here in Israel. The goal, if you ask me, for the long run, and these technologies are also evolving in terms of aquaculture. If today these types of macroalgae are grown in farms of 1-2 meter deep, there are already technologies coming in to allow better efficiencies, so 5 meters deep cages or even 10-meter deep cages, so you have a better use of a space, and to do it in the blue ocean, so you don't harm the beach and places, you don't harm the hotels, you don't harm the transportation, and you have something that, if you want to think of an even a more futuristic idea, is using oil rigs, abandoned oil rigs, instead of extracting oil out of the ocean. So it's these huge facilities in the ocean that extract oil from the bottom of the ocean. And there are thousands of such rigs that are abandoned. But they are still maintained because it's cheaper to maintain them than to demolish them.
Right.
So you can consider a biorefinery, like I mentioned before, sitting on an oil rig that used to harm the environment, and then you have on it a facility that in the surrounding you have fish farms, you have algae farms, you generate alternative food, you generate alternative energy, wind energy, ocean energy, plastics, and agriculture products, all in one place that used to deliver bad things to the environment, and now all of a sudden can be an amazing facility. So the future is quite bright if we do the things correctly. That's what we think.
So do you have any plans to provide bio ink to 3D print products in the future?
Yeah, we hope so. It's another aspect that we always want to be on top of, new technologies. So that's one of them. It's still, I think it's still in its infancy, right? It's still starting to grow, but obviously, if this industry will do things correctly, it will be in every home. So for us, it makes sense to follow this up. Make the connection. We have some connections with this type of companies, so that we can review and modify as well and suit these applications too. Yeah, of course.
Pretty cool. I would love to understand the regulatory side of things. Is there any local FDA in Israel that has to approve this product before any environmental testing? Because you are claiming here probably no negative impact on the environment. So is there any like a legal regulatory process that you have to go through to really make that claim?
Well, there are processes when you talk about medical and food and beverage. There are some regulations or associations that we need to follow. It's a known polymer that we produce, so the
Okay.
market already know it. So if you look at the FDA, probably we need to make some confirmation on the way that we operate. So the process itself, but the product is pretty straightforward. It will need to be tested to see. So if you go for medical, so no endotoxins, for example,
Right.
it's not GMO, so there is no hassle from that aspect. It's very clean. So there will be regulatory aspects, but they are not as crucial as going direct medical contact materials that are the actual producers.
And do you plan to focus on Israel market as your potential buyer and partner, or it will be, or you have plans to expand?
No, I think that Israel is too small. Initially, Israel is a very good place to start a business
Right.
in. From all aspects, it's an amazing ecosystem here. From if you think of biotechnology in general, a lot of experts, a lot of professors, a lot of data and ideas. But as you think commercially, we are a drop in the ocean. So we need to go out elsewhere.
Right.
I think that if we will be able to do it in a good way, then it will be Europe, Asia, of course, and Americas. Yeah, it's
Right, right. I think Israel, the good thing is, it's what I heard is early adopter market. So they are open to try alternative approaches, new technologies. But yeah, market is not big enough. There are not too many people to adopt either, right? So
yeah.
I think it's a great segue to talk about the life science ecosystem in Israel, because I heard there's quite a bit innovation going on. I learned about one company recently. They're doing microgravity research, like they're running experiments in space. It's an Israel-based startup. So there are a lot of cool things going on. So I would love to know how does the ecosystem look in the life science space? What type of support system exists? Or if you want to start a company in Israel, where would you go? And like, how does it look?
I think that it's something that has evolved in the last couple of years in terms of life science. From one aspect, well, life science is quite big. So the medical industry in Israel is strong for a long time, including biomedical industry. But if you look at sustainability or circularity and things like that, it's evolving. There are multiple incubator programs that you can get involved with, depending, the size of the company, where you're at, and what you aim to do. And there is a very supportive ecosystem from all aspects: universities, partners. Most of the big companies has innovation offices here in Israel, and most of the big Israeli companies has innovation centers where they support companies and people with ideas. So you can be just a man or a woman with an idea, and you will find your way around. It's a very closed or small ecosystem that can support you. I don't think that we have enough fundraising mechanisms out of those incubation programs. So we are not yet at the stage of VCs like we have for the AI or cyber or software in general. But it's starting to rise. There are some very nice VCs and funds that are building now or has been built in the last 2 years or 3 years that supports this type of activity. It's a new era. It's a long-term return on investment. It's not a software, that you expect to get your money back in the short time. These are
Right.
processes that takes time, and we need to understand that. And the VCs also learn this and are building towards that. So altogether, I think that if you need some place that could help you accelerate, Israel is probably a very good place to start it, with a very good ecosystem. We have some very nice companies in the circular economy, in the environment.
So if someone want to start a company in Israel, like what advice would you give to that person?
Be ready. Be ready, be confident, know what you're doing, know the industry. It's all about people at the end of the line,
Right.
especially here, I think. It's not enough that you have an amazing idea. You also need to deliver it and be humble.
Okay, I think it takes a decade to really turn a great idea into a real business, right? So you have to be really willing to put your head down and keep working for without giving up, right? If you don't give up, by default, you will be successful. Because if you focus on one problem for 10 years, you have better chance to win.
Yeah, and also, be open to learn. There's always something that we can learn from anyone, even if you are the biggest expert in something. Be open to learn, be open to new ideas, and be ready, be agile. I think that's the key in startups. You need to be agile. You need to be able to shift and move and adapt and adopt, and that's how you make it. Otherwise, you get stuck.
100%. Adi, it's really inspiring what you are doing and what you have managed to do in a really short period of time. And I cannot wait to see what's next. And once your product is in the market or Bio Inc. is in the market. So thank you so much for joining me today. And let's talk soon.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.